Sony and Nintendo break up. Intel christens the Pentium. And EA and ESPN bury the hatchet. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man.
What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. Today we're traveling back 30 years to January of 1993. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Wouter.
Good morning.
Welcome back.
I think let's give myself a boost a little because I feel a little tired still. But let's pretend I'm really caffeinated and active.
Oh, we always pretend you're caffeinated and active. It's okay. Don't worry. So, what you been up to lately?
Yeah, a lot of modern gaming actually. I've been. I made that list on my Twitch stream that I wanted to play certain games of my backlog, and I started doing that.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
modern games.
Modern games, yeah. Mostly indie games. So and there were some really, really great games, and I'm super addicted to two of them. And one of them is Tinykin. I don't know if you know that.
No, haven't heard of it.
It's a platformer, and it looks really like a modern cartoon. It's really great. All the characters in the game are sprites, and the environments are 3D. And you just walk around and pick up little creatures which help you, like Pikmin. And there's no enemies, and you're just running around, jumping around, and there's a lot of nice movement mechanics in the game, and just picking up stuff and solving little puzzles. It's really a really chill game, and it looks beautiful, and just really great vibes. And my kids love to watch it as well. So yeah, overall a really, really nice time, and I couldn't stop playing it last night, so it was a little late. There were like 1,600 little objects, like coins you can pick up in one level, and I don't know, but I felt the urge to find them all.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so basically what you're telling me is that I'm going to be dealing with a zombie Wouter this week. Okay, I get it. It's cool. Okay, so we do have a lot of stories to get to, and we need to do this before you collapse. So, let's get on with the proceedings. Remember, everybody, when we're talking about January of 1993, we're always using cover dates of magazines and newspapers with those dates. So obviously the news happened at some point before that. Please don't send me any letters. You can send me letters, though, on all of our socials and the email address videogamenewsroomtimemachine@gmail.com. All the links are in the show notes below. Please feel free to do that, as well as all the references to everything that we've got, as well as a link to our Patreon page where for just $1 a month you can enjoy early access to our interview episodes, as well as bonus content such as the video version of our first segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where our intrepid co-host must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated January of 1993 for 7 minutes that they've never played before. And boy, did we have a list of classics. We had Comanche, Car and Driver, the first Need for Speed game, if you will, Goblins 2, World of Illusion, Madden 93, Viewpoint, Wing Commander on the Super NES, Wing Commander on the Amiga, which I almost did that to you. That would have been a punishment.
Okay.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis on the Amiga, which, if Mads is coming back soon, if you thought Champion of the Raj was bad. No, okay. And Alone in the Dark, and so many other great ones. But since we haven't actually covered a particular platform, and this was a unique game for that platform, I thought it was time to give its due to the Atari Lynx with a game called Dracula the Undead. So, Wouter, you, the handheld expert with your wall of Game Boys behind you, who does not own a Lynx, are you ready for some Dracula Undead?
It's been 30 years ago probably since I played on a Atari Lynx. So let's
Perfect.
go.
Let's do it. Okay. Welcome back, Wouter, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe Dracula the Undead based off your 7 minutes with the game?
It's a point-and-click adventure on a handheld system, which is pretty interesting, especially at this age, 1993. That's, I think, pretty early for that. And I've watched Mads play Fish Files, and I think that's 10 years later. So it's interesting try that I tried it, and you're playing a guy in, I assume, Dracula's mansion. I don't know.
Yeah, you're Jonathan Harker.
Okay.
He's the lawyer who's sent to Transylvania to organize Dracula's estate move to England.
Okay, yeah, and it looks, everything is sepia, so it looks you're playing in the past, and it has beautiful sprite scaling when you walk into the screen. It's like isometric perspective, I can say, maybe a little lower. But when you walk into the screen, the sprite gets really big, and it actually looks really beautiful for a handheld game, I think. It's
definitely.
But one problem, it feels really slow. I didn't reach anything in that 7 minutes. I walked around because you still have that old school words you have to choose, the verbs to open a closet, for example, and then watch the closet, and then pick up the item in the closet. So you have to do like 5 things to grab something, which is a little silly nowadays. It likes to waste your time a lot, but but that's something of its age, I think. I played, for example, of course, Monkey Island games and the Day of the Tentacle, and those play very similar, but of course you don't have a mouse on the handheld. And here it's just you walk around with the D-pad, and you can, when you press one button, you go into the menu where you can choose verbs, and then you can go back into walking around with another button, and then you can use that verb on an item you're looking at, which is actually quite decent system for this. It works. It's only really slow.
It works. That's a great way of describing it.
Yeah, but what I've seen, I can't say anything negative other than it's really slow. And also the music was a little grating, but yeah, maybe a lot of people play handheld without music anyway, so it was a really short loop, so it was decent music, but it was really short, so you will get tired of it really fast.
That even in the little bit that I saw you play now, that did kind of drone on. Now, it may just be creating the atmosphere of, being Harker alone in Dracula's castle, blah, 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 which, is part of the story and part of the trope of, something terrible is happening, but you don't know what exactly.
Yeah, so. And I think it succeeded a little in that for what it's worth. Yeah, I think it succeeded. And what I said, I can't find anything negative other than cool. Maybe the slow choosing the words. It could be streamlined a lot nowadays, but I think for the time it's a fine game, and I'm actually quite interested to look a little further into this game.
Very cool. So you would recommend it?
Yes, but we couldn't find the save feature yet, and I hope it's in there. If it's not, play it on something with save states, or else you'll be screwed after a while.
That is probably true. So definitely something to keep in mind. I don't know if it has a save function or not. Looking at the packaging right now to see if it mentions a save state feature. I can't imagine it doesn't, but then again, hey, I've been wrong about these things in the past, so...
for example, Game Gear games, I think there's maybe 2 Game Gear games with a save battery in there. So there's a lot of games from that age which don't save. So maybe there's a password feature, but I couldn't find any continue screen or something. It just started into the game.
Interesting.
Did you see it? No, I only saw...
No, I have... This is one of those where I haven't played it, where I've known about the game for years and years and years, but I've never actually played it. And so you were one of my wonderful guinea pigs.
Yeah, but there was no main menu where you can choose new game or load game or password or something. And I don't know if the links had any internal memory. Probably not.
I don't think it had an internal memory. No.
So
that is a good question. Let's see. It can be paused, apparently.
Wow.
I'm looking at the Atari Gamer, AtariGamer.com. And it has no save states.
Oh my word.
Do you have to play through the whole game in one go?
With that battery life?
Oh, wow.
Yikes. There's probably not many people who played it all the way through then. Maybe if you know all the places where to look, you can go over with it fast. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it here, just their breakdown. There's Link's SD save support. No, but that would be SD card. It can be paused, yes. Well, maybe if you pause it, there's some kind of menu for a save of some kind. But yeah, who knows? Okay, well, we'll look into it further. But at least for now, it is a recommendation from Wouter.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Okay, so before we can turn on the time machine, though, we need to make one more quick stop with our good friend Ethan to find out what I got wrong in our December 1992 jump.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
In our December 1992 episode...
Mads! There he is. There's Mads. Is he mad? Or is he just as mad as the rest of us? That's the real question.
You got nothing, do you?
Well, sometimes being impromptu is a talent, Carl. And a talent which only a few possess.
And you're
but
not
Mads,
one of them. No. Okay.
Hey. Yeah, I've had you laughing for a good long while. So
hey, my standards are very, very low. Okay, I'll give
yes, I guess that is true. Dang. I almost got him, folks.
This is why I record so late at night, everybody. That way, everything the co-hosts say is entertaining.
So, Mads, don't get drawn in by Carl's assumptions about things. Do not assume that what he says about the Sega and Nintendo thing is entirely accurate, because literally nobody else thinks the same thing, except maybe a couple Sega fanboys. So,
yeah,
be cautious. Be cautious with Carl.
Yeah. I hate to break it to you, but the idea that Sega and Sony patched it up, and the Sony PlayStations that we have do not have the mythical 32-bit chip, is, as far as I'm concerned, proof positive. There was never going to be a 32-bit chip.
It was with Philips, anyways, but we're not going to keep going on this endlessly.
That's not what they announced. They announced.
Yes, I'm not talking, but I'm talking more generally about you saying that Nintendo, every time Sega announces something, Nintendo announces something right on top of them. Nobody actually says that except Carl. Just want to note that.
Nobody else has done a chronological retelling of the story.
So that's the end of that.
Please, move on, yes.
We are in December of 1992, about to close up the book on the episodes kind of recorded in 2022, and finalize the two chapters until we come back and do December 2000.
You're just eating up time because there aren't a lot of corrections this time.
Hey, my friend. Are you complaining? I can come up with something. No. Carl, your beard looks scruffy today. DeMark in the Department of Corrections.
Hey, I just went and I just had it cut at the barber shop today. This is the least scruffy it has been in forever. But,
so, two things. Then we're talking about the Sega Genesis or Sega CD memory card, and in fact, the Neo Geo also had a memory card.
Cool.
It is something you could actually. It was kind of a selling point. You could transfer between your Neo Geo that you definitely have at home to the arcade and keep your progress.
That's right. They did have those memory card slots on them, on the old Neo Geo cabinets.
There's an even older form of memory card that Cinematronics did that was really weird, but it was very, not a lot of people had these cards. But on their baseball games, you could actually store your stats and things.
That's pretty cool.
It was a weird monster of a thing. It has this kind of it looks like if you've ever opened up a USB, that's pretty much what it looks like.
Wow.
Yeah, it was not a great idea, and in fact, the major problem with it is that people kept sticking gum inside the memory card slot.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, welcome to an arcade.
So never quite built for purpose. And finally, you said the guy who did the Madden console port, which I'm presuming you were talking about
Scott Orr.
Scott Orr.
Yeah.
But he worked for a company. That company was called Park Place Productions.
True. Wasn't Park Place Productions... I might be getting this wrong. He set up his own dev studio. That was also the one that made ABC Monday Night Football. Is that Park Place?
But the Genesis version of Madden, I believe that he did the stuff on. He was working through Park Place. Yeah, it's a little confusing, but there's more. I'm just noting here. There's more than one person who made the Madden console port.
Of course, yeah.
And in fact, it's not even a port. It's just an original game.
Yeah. And port was the wrong word because, that Apple II game had very little in common other than the fact that the name Madden was on it, and it was about football.
That's the whole thing. Go watch the They Create Worlds episode on it.
Yes, exactly. It's a very good episode on it. And
that is it for December of 1992.
Excellent. Well then, in that case, thank you for eating up 5 minutes of time on something that wasn't related to the corrections. Or something.
It is. It absolutely is, Carl. Down in the depths of your soul, you know it to be true. And by the way, we have new 1993 sound effects.
Woohoo! So, let's thank you, Ethan, as always, for your service and your amazing sound effects. And everybody, go and check out Ethan's documentary series. Links in the show notes.
Beep, 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 beep. See you.
Geo.
Yeah, and it was something that I had forgotten. I mean, we just talked about it, but yeah, the arcade cabinets, the Neo Geo arcade cabinets always had a slot to put in your memory card. So in theory, you could, get high scores or something on your Neo Geo at home and bring that into the arcade, or vice versa.
Well, that's a little silly functionality.
I mean, at the time, I don't think many games took advantage of it, but there are other games. Most famously for me is Ghost Squad. Have you ever played Ghost Squad?
No.
Okay, it's a late Sega 3D light gun game in the arcades. There's 3 missions. You're special tactical ops. You've got this big gun. You can set auto, semi-auto, or single shot. It also has a bomb button and also a special function button. So there's certain quick time events inside the game. Like, they show you real quick which order to cut the wires on a bomb. They show it to you for 1 second on the screen, and then you have to cut the wires on the bomb in the right order and stuff. And every time you play through it, I think there's 20 variations of each of the 3 levels. So suddenly, instead of going left, you'll go right.
So you don't get any repeats if you bring your memory card.
Well, and it didn't use a memory card. What it used was like a credit card that you could buy at the arcade, and you popped it in, and it had your save state on it.
Interesting.
And so you could upgrade your weapons, and each new version of the level was more difficult than the previous one.
Oh, wow. So it's actually a really fancy progression system in there.
It's amazing. And if you want to play it today, there's an amazing port of it on the Wii.
Oh, well.
So, and I still play it quite often over Dolphin on the computer.
Okay.
And yeah, my save state is very advanced. It's fun. I mean, it's one of those things where every time you go back to it, there's a slightly different pattern. There's a slightly different version of the stuff. You see the same action from different angles. So like in the first level, there's this ballroom where this big, international event is supposed to happen. So in some versions, you're on the ground level. In other versions, you're suddenly up on the balcony. In other versions, you're coming in from another side. So you get to see the same action, and like sometimes the guys will always be in the same positions. It's just now you get to shoot them from a different angle and stuff. It's fun.
It sounds very, very fancy.
Yeah, no,
for the time.
What?
For that time, when did that release?
Oh no, that was probably 2004, 2005, somewhere in that area.
Okay, so it's a little newer.
Oh yeah, but
it's a modern game.
Yeah, it's definitely a game I recommend. I mean, it's probably my favorite light gun shooter, and I'm a big fan of light gun games, but that's probably my favorite one.
And it works well with the Wii mode.
Oh, excellent with the Wii mode, yeah.
Well,
so
let's give that a try then.
Exactly.
Another one in the backlog.
We'll get to that. At some point, it'll be a 7 minutes in heaven. Okay, but let's move on then. So we've got the corrections done. We've got the 7 minutes in heaven done. Let's turn on the time machine and head back to January of 1993.
The best possible day. 1993.
Kid to point a gun at a television set.
Welcome back to January of 1993. Wouter, what's our first headline?
Namco buys Aladdin's Castle.
We just reported in our November 1992 jump that WMS had purchased the Aladdin's Castle chain from an investment group. Well, now it turns out that there was a shop-around clause in the agreement, and Namco has swooped in and outbid WMS. The 275 locations should become Namco's within the next month, and WMS will be getting a reported $1 million breakup fee.
So, remember me, what's Aladdin's Castle again?
Aladdin's Castle is the chain of mall arcades that they may not be the first ones to do it, but they were the ones that popularized the mall arcades starting in the early 70s. So just as Pong was coming out, they were starting to put arcades, which in the United States were often seen as seedy places, but they were putting them in family-friendly shopping malls with attendants. They basically made the arcade a socially acceptable place. They built that atmosphere.
And where children are allowed.
Exactly. And they were in hundreds and hundreds of malls.
Okay.
And so Aladdin's Castle was a huge chain. They belonged to Bally for a while, or were part of the Bally family. It's a complicated thing. We've talked about it before. And WMS, which is Williams, Bally, Midway, that group of companies all merged together, was going to be buying them back. And I think Williams had owned it also for a while, the chain. Again, we've talked about this in November. I don't remember all the issues. It's one of those complicated, owned again, not owned again companies.
But what's Namco doing with it now?
Well, Namco has always been an arcade operator in Japan. Namco already owns arcades in the United States, so now they're buying this up, and they're going to bring it under their umbrella.
And they can put all their games in there.
Yeah, and if you want more details about this, I actually did an interview with the guy who's going to end up running this version of Aladdin's Castle under the Namco brand. And now I can't remember his name. Crap. Really nice Irishman. Kevin Hayes. Kevin Hayes, that's it. Yeah, so if you want to know more about this, check out my interview with Kevin Hayes, where he talks at length about, taking this over and what it was like running this chain.
Okay.
So,
and only Patreons can listen to that?
No. That's on the regular feed.
Okay.
The interview episodes are only up early. So I always have 3 interview episodes that are only on Patreon. As soon as a new interview episode goes up, the third or the first of those 3 goes to the regular. So there's 3 interviews right now that are still only for the patrons.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So check that out.
Let's go on.
Yes.
SMP to bring Lawnmower Man to life. Lawnmower Man. Sorry. Yes. SMP to bring Lawnmower Man to life.
SMP Creations is promising to bring true 3D space motion to an arcade near you, like it was seen in the Lawnmower Man movie. The Voyager system combines VR with a gyroscopic system to create the ultimate immersive experience.
Sounds like what we have today as a VR system with a gyroscopic system in there, but probably it's a lot crappier than we have it now.
Well, as far as I can tell, this never actually hits the market. It's something that they're talking about. There's even a business prospectus that they put out, a little flyer, promising all the stuff that they're going to do. And apparently they also had some demo units up and running at some place. Links to the prospectus are in the show notes. But yeah, this is just way too much. But it was such a hyped up idea. This Lawnmower Man movie got so much hype. Of course, it was quite disappointing when it finally came out. Have you ever seen The Lawnmower Man?
Parts of it, and I played some games of it. So I get the idea. The Game Boy game is actually quite fancy.
It is interesting. I mean, they tried to do as much as they could with the technology. But yeah, I mean, the movie was disappointing. The idea of VR is in the air at this point. Everybody feels like it's, within a year or 2 we'll have it, as we will see in later stories today. But yeah, it's a little too much. It's too early. And it's just way too expensive for a coin-op or entertainment center style setup at this point.
Okay. Well, let's continue on with something other virtual. I think it's also VR.
Oh, yeah.
Virtuality is coming home.
According to a report in CU Amiga magazine, W Industries, the maker of the Virtuality arcade hardware, are working on a lightweight version of the headset for an upcoming home console. According to their plans, the lighter weight version would also be adaptable to other systems and home computers.
Is this that system that has a lot of cameras and you...
No, a Virtuality is this arcade-based VR headset system. So it's the only one that really makes it out commercially, where you have this virtual reality headset that does the motion tracking, and you've got a little joystick thing in your hand that basically acts like the controller, and you can move it around. Games like Dactyl Attack. They also have versions where it's an RPG. They've got versions where you're in a race car. But yeah, it's very, very primitive, very simple 3D graphics, no shading, no nothing like that. It's very, very bare bones.
Crazy that it took like 30 years to polish this technology, and there's still people getting sick of this stuff when they use it because of low refresh rates and stuff.
Well, I mean, you really, until you had properly shaded 3D, and think about it, with virtual reality, you have to produce the same image twice.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, it's not like,
powerful system.
Something running on your computer fairly smoothly, like let's say if you got a really good gaming rig at this point in time, you can play Ultima Underworld at maybe 25 frames a second.
Yeah.
But now you'd have to have two of those rigs to run both of the eyes. And 25 frames a second is okay if you're sitting in your seat in front of a screen with a mouse. It's not okay if you're moving your head around and getting sick. So, I mean, yeah, the computer technology just is too early to use this appropriately. They figured out what the idea is.
Yeah.
But the technology is just
when you hear these ideas, you see what it is nowadays, which is interesting. Yeah. That it took 30 years of polishing actually the same product all the time, and now it's just something which works for some people and for some it doesn't. But
yeah. Now, a quick note here: what W Industries, or the console that W Industries was working towards, was going to be Jaguar VR, which ends up getting shown at the CES show, the Winter CES show in 1995, and
never released, probably.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about that, check out the second part of my interview with Mr. Trammell. He goes deep into that. Put a link to that in the show notes as well. Okay,
more Jaguar. Atari shooting for $99 Jaguar.
Oh yeah, you never go for the rounded up number if you can. Atari is beginning to prep for a summer 1993 launch of the Jaguar. The cartridge-based system will hopefully have a $99 launch price, but officials at Atari admit it could go as high as $150.
Hopefully a $99 launch price. I thought the Jaguar was a really expensive device back in the day.
No, the Jaguar was fairly low priced when it came out, but it still comes out in November of '93 for $250.
Well, and how much is that compared with the other systems?
Well, when the PlayStation launches in '95, $299. It comes out at $299, but that's in 1995.
So it's 2 years later.
That's 2 years later. The Saturn came out at $350.
Oh yeah, then $250 is actually cheap.
$250 is very cheap for a system which is supposed to be 64-bit. Now, they're admitting at this point that it's dual 32-bit chips.
Do the math.
Do the math, exactly. But, and it's going to come out in November of 93, but it's going to come out with extremely limited inventory. So it's going to launch with so few consoles available that it's not going to get really mass retail until early 94.
Okay, and then
so
probably that drives up the price as well.
Well, it becomes the price doesn't drop until a bit later. I don't know the whole history. We'll cover that in the next couple of years. But it's basically going to be disappointing because the launch game sucks. The pack-in game, I should say, sucks. There's just problems. And with some of those problems, again, Leonard Trammell goes into detail. There was a known flaw in the hardware, which actually prevented it from functioning at full speed. Wow. Similar to the Commodore 64 had a serious hardware flaw where you couldn't get the full speed out of the disk drive. The Jaguar is going to have the same problem in the bus between the chips. Wow. Basically, seriously slowing it down. They knew they had the problem, but they would have missed the Christmas business altogether. And so the executives in charge made the decision to just launch it anyway.
Wow, that's awful. I recently watched the story about Doom on Atari Jaguar, and that was an awful story as well. And I really recommend watching that story on YouTube.
Well, you give me the link to it, and we'll put it in the show notes. Wait, are you talking about the Jaguar version, or are you talking about the 3DO version? You're talking the 3DO version was a disaster.
Oh yeah, the Jaguar version was quite okay. The 3DO version...
The Jaguar version was made by John Carmack himself.
Ah, yeah.
Oh, no, the Jaguar version, Carmack really loved the hardware design, and he worked closely with them to make it function. The problem is that there was a hardware problem. You could not move data fast enough between the chips.
Because the GBA port is based on the Jaguar port. That's of Doom. And also the 3DO port, I think. But yeah. Well, there's more about 3DO now. 3DO reveals more.
3DO has revealed details of their marketing plan and the system itself. The 32-bit RISC processor machine will be sold in various configurations by Matsushita brand names, with EA Software helping to bolster its library. The hope is to create a new, quote, standard, unquote, for CD technology. The expected $500+ price range sans FMV add-on may make it a tough sell, though.
Wow, that's a jump from the $99 of the Jaguar.
Well, you also have to remember, at this point in time, you can get a base one controller, no game added Genesis or Super Nintendo for $99.
Okay.
Because we're in the middle, all of this is happening in the middle of the 16-bit console war in the United States. So all of these guys announcing these super new 3D consoles are doing it in the backdrop of these two 16-bit consoles just warring it out.
Yep, and the CD technology was still really expensive at that time. I think like a CD player.
The Sega CD just launched. The TurboGrafx CD add-on has been out for a while, but they've just released the Turbo Duo. And CD-ROM technology is just now really starting to penetrate the PC world.
Yeah, I remember just this regular CD player was already really expensive, and the discs were expensive as well. So,
oh yeah, I mean, this is still a moment in time when the processors that you need to make a CD player function to decode the information, while nowadays we think of them as throwaway technology, at the time were still very expensive bits of tech. And then you also have to have this drive that has to read the CD with such precision by the standards of the day that it was not simple technology. This was not an easy thing to get up and running, and not a cheap thing, especially if it's going to be able to withstand the rigors of basically being a child's toy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's a high-end CD system that's going to sit on a pedestal and people are going to be very careful with it. You know, you're going to have a 5-year-old has to be able to cram that disc in there and start the game, and it's got to run for 10 hours straight. A normal CD player doesn't have to do that.
No.
And so this is why making these things robust enough and still cheap enough is going to be a challenge. And 3DO is going to fail because the 3DO multimedia player, when it first launches, is going to launch at $700.
Wow. And people are complaining about the recent PlayStations.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of the main reasons why the 3DO doesn't actually hit a price point where it could have penetration until after the PS1 comes out. And by then it looks antiquated because it's going to be outdated technology.
Wow. Yeah, weird that I mix up Jaguar and 3DO. Maybe because they're both from the same age and both sort of failed consoles.
Yeah, they're both consoles that came out at this point in time when, do we go CD? Do we not go CD? What do 3D graphics really mean? How many polygons do you have to have on the screen to make a game function? All of these questions weren't really worked out yet. And they were both by companies that didn't really have an established footing in gaming anymore. Atari had lost their established footing. 3DO was trying to establish it from scratch. Mm-hmm. And so, they just were not they weren't in the right place with the right technology at the right time.
It's crazy because Sony nails it 2 years later and they are also new in the business. But
well, they're sort of new. Let's take a look at the next story.
Right. Sony and Nintendo breakup.
The Japanese business newspaper Nihon Keizai Shimbun, which I probably just murdered, reported on November 19th, 1992, that Sony had called off its recently rekindled relationship with Nintendo. Apparently, the joint marketing push of Sony's PlayStation, a CD-enhanced Super Nintendo, by Sony and Nintendo has hit a snag, and Sony has indefinitely postponed plans for the device. Sony is already publishing games for the Sega CD, and while they still have an active agreement with Nintendo, they are leaving open the possibility of developing their own CD format.
Probably Ethan is already on his edge of his seat, waiting what you're going to say now.
Well, last month we talked about how Sony and Nintendo had miraculously rekindled their relationship, and now the new Sony PlayStation was going to have the 32-bit miracle add-on chip that Nintendo had been touting. Unfortunately, of course, we know from the prototypes that there was no 32-bit chip in the Sony PlayStation prototypes. And so it's clear that, there probably wasn't a chip. Sony probably realized that they were just being pulled around, especially after they started supporting the Sega CD. And what's really happening here is Sony is learning the lessons of how do you make games for CD. They're figuring out, okay, what are the differences between this and console gaming, aka you can't just constantly be grabbing data off of your storage medium because the access speed isn't fast enough.
Yeah,
you have to develop your games and design them around those limitations. But at the same time, how do you make the most out of this extra storage space? And, well, this is the birth of the PlayStation or the PSX project. The PlayStation X.
They learned. They learned.
It. Or at least they got enough of an insight to figure out this is how we have to do it. And it's still going to be another. I mean, they're going to launch the PlayStation in Japan. I believe it's December of '94. So we're a little less than 2 years out from the Japanese launch. It's going to be another year after that for the US launch. Europe, I don't know. I can't remember when Europe launches.
Probably 2 years later.
Yeah. But they're going to take the world by storm because they're going to come in with a machine that is basically just miles ahead as far as the ease of use for the developer, as far as, the visual punch it can hit, even if it's very primitive in many regards. And it's going to give us some of the best games of that generation, if not of all time. I mean, Wipeout and Castlevania Symphony of the Night are still, infinitely playable to this day. So, yeah, it's going to be
Metal
fun.
Gear Solid. Stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Now a lot of acronyms. EGM calls out NOA on CD BS.
Yes, I was very proud of writing that one. Electronic Gaming Monthly's editor Ed Samrad's editorial this month calls out Nintendo on their vaporware campaign, claiming that they will have a CD-ROM drive any day now. The timing of their announcement, which he lists is considerable detail, goes beyond just possible coincidence, and he accuses them directly of just trying to dissuade users from buying Sega's system.
So again, this vaporware system of Nintendo.
He calls it vaporware. He uses the term vaporware. And he lists out, first they made this announcement and it just happened to coincide with this other action by Sega. Then they made this announcement, happened to coincide with this announcement by Sega. Then they did this and it happened to coincide. And he calls them out and he's like, this is nonsense. You don't have Jack. You just don't want people buying the Sega CD. You're trying to dissuade them from doing it. And he just wishes that Nintendo would, play fair. Be like, hey, let your games speak for themselves. And so, yeah. Now, granted, Semrad is also famous for a review he wrote in '86 calling the NES the worst of the three new systems on the market because it was the Master System, the Atari 7800, and the NES, and he criticizes the controller as being this blocky thing with no diagonals, and the graphics are poor, and what the hell is with the damn robot, and the zapper is terrible technology because the screen keeps flickering to black and white dots and stuff.
Well, honestly, he's not wrong.
No.
Except for the diagonals are great, I think, on the D-pad of the NES, but there of course the Master System had many more colors. It looks great and sounds great.
Yeah. And the light gun is better. It's better technology. But yeah, I mean, it's just funny because he is listing all the technology problems, but he doesn't actually go into the software in that review, which is a problem.
Yeah.
But he has a big long career in gaming journalism, so it was fun to read this editorial. If you guys want to read it yourselves, it's in the show notes.
It's always good to have troublemakers like that to
of course.
Say the different thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Calling him out.
Johnny Turbo sets out to save gamers.
In one of the most bizarre ad campaigns I've ever seen, NEC has launched Johnny Turbo, a 3-page comic about a man named Johnny who is going to fight evil humanoid robots dressed all in black that have falsely convinced the kids of the city that Fika's, not Sega's, Fika's CD console is the first of its kind, despite the Turbo Duo having beaten it to market.
Wow, sounds like prime 90s marketing.
Oh yeah, no, this thing is so terrible. I had heard of the Johnny Turbo character before and seen ads with him, but I had never seen this comic before. And it's really bad because it's like their big claim is that the Sega CD games, Sega is not the first. We were here first.
Okay.
And tries to also claim the games aren't as cool or something, but, it really is, you should buy us because we were here first. And they called it instead of Sega, Fika. I mean, there's the word fecal is in there somewhere. This is just so bad.
But there was a lot around Johnny Turbo, I think. Isn't he also a game character or a real life person? I don't know.
No, I don't think it was real life, but I do know. I know they used him in a lot of ad materials for a while. But I honestly don't think he was in an actual game.
Oh, I thought he was like maybe an actual person as well. Who calls himself that, but maybe I'm mixing around stuff again, like the Jaguar and the 3DO.
No. You're thinking of. You might be thinking of that. In Japan, Sega had that that karate guy.
Oh yeah, Sanshiro Saturn or Sanshiro.
Yeah, exactly. He was the Sega Saturn guy. But yeah, no. So it's just there's no point here. Johnny Turbo just bad.
Well, it sounds fun to watch these commercials again just for the laugh.
Yeah, unfortunately, they never did a TV version. As far as I can tell, it was just print ads. But oh well, okay. Maybe it's better that way.
Well, Fika is doing something else. Sega introduces 6-button controller.
Sega has revealed their new 6-button controller at CES. While it fails to add shoulder buttons or a select button, the 2 parallel lines of 3 buttons may make it perfect for a particular pugilistic competition game.
What game should it be?
I don't know. Maybe it's Street Fighter 2?
Yeah, maybe
that's coming to Sega?
Yeah, it's probably one of the only games who actually uses that 6-button controller.
Well, I mean, all the fighting games.
Yeah,
Mortal Kombat. I mean, every fighting game that comes out was going to take advantage of that later on. But it's definitely one of those where, Street Fighter 2 is the thing that's getting people to buy the Super Nintendo at this point. And it's the one thing Sega really, really desperately needs to continue to be the cool kids console.
Yeah, but that's not playable with 3 buttons.
Exactly. I mean, you can in theory. The way that they solved it for Street Fighter Champion Edition,
I think you have to press start or something.
You had to press start to switch between punches and kicks, which is nonsense. And there is going to be a slight delay. It feels a little weird. They're already introducing it now, and the game hasn't come out yet, even though the rumors are flying that it's going to come. And if you want to know more about the development of that, check out my interview with Joe Morici, who was the head or one of the top guys at Capcom USA at the time. And he talked about how they tried to do a version of it, then it wasn't good enough, then they scrapped it, then made another version, and so on and so forth. So
that controller actually is quite good, I think. Especially if you like the Saturn added the shoulder buttons, and then it's one of the best controllers out there, I think, for retro games.
It is. Having those 6 buttons for fighting games is amazing. Obviously, I'm a little partial to the 4 shoulder buttons of the PlayStation controller for 3D gaming. Especially in the days before the analog sticks. Before you added the DualShock.
You need tank controls. You need those L and R buttons.
Exactly. Being able to shift back and forth between your weapons with the same keys that you're firing with, sort of, that just felt natural. Because you can only use your thumb for the buttons anyway, for the fire buttons on the front anyway. So, you got those extra buttons. I'm still a proponent. The DualShock layout is the ideal layout. Now, the size-wise, it's still the Duke. The Duke is still the best controller made. I will defend that to the end. But not everybody has my wonderfully large hands. And now I'm falling purely into Donald Trump territory here. Okay. Let's move on before this gets
let's
any worse.
Quickly move on. Yeah. Game Genie comes to the SNES or the SNES or
SNES,
whatever you want.
Yeah. If you're in the States, it's SNES. If you're in England, it's the SNES.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, we always said SNES as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Weird people. Okay. With the legal paths cleared, Galoob has launched the SNES version of their cheat code add-on for Nintendo's 16-bit machine. Included is a booklet with cheats for 51 games, and if you buy before June 30th, 1993, they'll send you codes for the next 50 for free.
I never used one of these things, but they could be useful, especially nowadays when I play NES games. I really like to have some sort of quality of life improvements. I'll say they call it cheats, but I think sometimes it's a quality of life improvement when you have infinite lives.
Especially when you're older, yes. And I mean, basically, to make it simple, what you're really just doing is doing address rewriting to the memory. So it's similar to what we used to use with pokes and peeks on the 8-bit home computers.
Yeah.
But it's now that Galoob has won the court battles, they're releasing this for everything. Every console basically is going to get some version of this, and there's nothing Nintendo can do about it. Except maybe, actually add more playable modes to the game.
So you don't need it.
Exactly.
But probably they did the thing all the way around. They probably make it harder and maybe harder to hack it as well. Change the amount of lives. You can, of course, hide that maybe in code and try to prevent cheating. But
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of cheat codes that are built into the games at this point. I mean, the magazines for the last few months have been going crazy with all of the cheat codes for the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter 2. Codes where you could play as the same character on screen or something. Both players have the same character, and there's a ton of these codes out there. And people are just, it's become a national pastime, it almost seems like, to try to find them all.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that recently there was a code released of Super Punch-Out where you can play it in 2-player mode. So the second player can play the opponent, and that works, and it just uncovered like last year or something, which is crazy.
And a lot of these codes were built in by the developers to test stuff out.
Oh yeah, that's probably
and so they knew what they were. They were just left in the code,
and they never publicly
announced it. Yeah. And then nowadays people can take the ROM apart, they can try to reverse engineer it, and that's when they discover. I remember a few years ago somebody was talking about there was a port of Smash TV, I think it was for the PlayStation 2, and when they were rejiggering the software to make it work on the PlayStation 2, they discovered there were whole tile sets for levels that never made it into the final game that were on the arcade ROMs. Different levels that they either didn't get time to finish, but, there were enemy classes and characters that just weren't in the original game.
Wow.
But they were still there in the ROM file. So, this kind of stuff happens. These games are complex,
Yeah, and especially if they're compiled, then you can't make anything out of it anymore. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, next story. Nintendo launches Classic Series for NES.
Nintendo is re-releasing several of its best-selling NES titles under a new Classic Series label. Games include Metroid, Zelda, and a now Mike Tyson-less Punch-Out. Speaking of which.
Yeah. Wow. So still they're releasing those classics, and yeah, that's quite good, because there's probably still a lot around now because of this.
Well, Nintendo is still expecting to sell hundreds of thousands of NESs this year. Because, let's face it, even though the Super NES and the Genesis are out there, if you can buy an NES for $60 or $70, for a lot of people that's going to be still better than buying the more expensive SNES.
Yeah.
And these consoles are still alive. The older generation of consoles are super cheap for them to manufacture at this point. And there's a lot of these classic games that are still very playable, that are properties that people are still going to see now in the Super Nintendo. There's going to be Super Metroid. There's going to be a new Zelda. These are also properties. There's going to be a Super Punch-Out. These are properties that are also going to show up on the Game Boy. So there's really no reason not to reissue some of these older titles that haven't been at retail in a while.
They are still doing it today.
Exactly. And they're going to get a taste of, we can sell the same game again and again? That's a great idea.
I have at least maybe 10 copies of Super Mario Bros. In my house.
Why not? I mean, it's timeless game design. So now granted, they're doing this on cartridge still. So while the manufacturing of these cartridges has gotten cheaper over time, there's still a minimum price involved with the manufacturer. Unlike the classic series that we're going to see later on CD-based consoles where, press another one of those? Fine, 5 cents. Let's do it. These are still, relatively expensive things to manufacture.
Yeah. So, but probably the memory chip sizes they're cheaper now. The memory chips. So.
And you still have to manufacture the casing. You've got to manufacture the board. I mean, there's certain minimum costs that never go away.
Yeah, but that's a Nintendo thing. They seem to like it for at least 10 years from.
Oh yeah,
from
oh yeah. They do like their cartridges.
Well,
just
let's
ask
go
the
over.
Switch owner.
Yeah, let's go over to computers. Intel reveals the name for the
586.
The 580. Well, Intel reveals the name for the 586.
Yeah. And it's the Pentium. The chip promises to be a huge leap forward over the 486 and finally put an end to market confusion from Intel rivals using their numbers.
Well, I struggled with 586. The Pentium is way easier. And the Pentium makes Quake run, which is a really great time in history, game history.
Well, Quake is not only going to run really well on a Pentium, but it's also is going to be the reason why one of Intel's competitors that they're trying to outsmart here by and this is a legal question. You can't copyright a number. This is why you had companies like AMD and Cyrex releasing chips that they called 386s and 486s, even though they weren't Intel 486s.
Oh, wow.
And this is why the 586 was simply going to be called Pentium, because now Cyrex and AMD cannot call their chips Pentiums, because that's a copyrighted, invented word. But Pentium has, pentagram 5 is built into the word. So it's the Pentium premium, the 5 premium, so to speak. And so they're leaning on the idea that it's the 586, but without calling it a 586. So now everybody else has to call their chip something else.
Ah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but weird that nowadays they changed back to numbers again. It's really a mumbo jumbo of numbers.
No,
when you
but
go
remember,
to
it's never only numbers. It's never only numbers. They've got the I5, the I7. As soon as you put a letter in there, it's copyrightable again.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. It's never only a number.
So at least put one letter in there, and then suddenly it's copyrightable. Wow.
Exactly.
I learned today. Thanks, Carl.
And now you know why we didn't get a 586 and a 686 and a 786 chip. We got the Pentium.
Cool. Well, let's talk about Motorola jumping a generation.
Yeah. Motorola has announced the next iteration of its 68,000 line of chips, the 68060, which will be trying to take on the Pentium head-on, but won't reach full production capacity until at least a year after the launch of Intel's latest. Combined with one of its biggest buyers, Apple, developing a RISC processor with IBM, the future of Motorola's CISC CPU family looks dire.
And I think they lost. I can't remember anything about this chip.
Yeah, I mean, the 68060 is going to show up in some Amiga variants. It's going to show up in a few things. But the problem is that the Pentium and other Intel-compatible chips from AMD and the like are going to continue to dominate. Apple is going to go now Motorola-less because the Mac has been running on Motorola 68,000 CPUs since the very beginning. Commodore and Atari are both getting out of that business. The Atari Jaguar is still going to have a 68,000 as one of the two co-processors, but it's not going to really need large quantities of chips. Commodore has got another year and 2 years left in it, and then it's gone. And Apple is developing the Power PC together with IBM because they're hoping to finally have a competitor to the Intel-based chipsets. But, the Power PC is never really going to take off in any significant way.
Nope.
So some of its technology is going to continue on, is going to have other lives. But yeah, for the most part, Motorola, which had a lead when they originally introduced the 68,000 back in 79, we covered it in one of our 40-year jumps, that it's starting to run out of steam because it just doesn't have the client base for it.
They probably waited too long to update that chip as well.
Well, I mean, they were always doing little updates, but the problem is if you don't have a standardized... and nobody was expecting one standard computer to rule them all. I mean, that was not a predictable thing all along. You had so many incompatible computer formats. The fact that everybody would sort of be like, yeah, okay, we're going to make everything intercompatible and you can just pop out one board and put in another board, that would really take off and everybody would just use one operating system, wasn't always a predictable future. And Motorola just unfortunately did not get into the business of making Intel compatible chips, which if they had gotten in there somehow would have been good, but they didn't have that. They didn't go that route.
Unfortunate for them.
Yeah.
Okay, more chips, more. Wow,
more chip talk.
More chip talk. Is the 286 dead?
PC Review magazine in the UK did a straw poll of industry execs to find out how they see the new year shaping up for PC compatibles. One of the most interesting questions was whether the 286 had its day. The divide is pretty stark between US and UK devs. Revolution, Bitmap Brothers, and DCD see a market for well-written, low-level code on 286 machines, while Ocean and Bullfrog see the 386 as the new target. Friend of the show, Wild Bill Steely, said that, quote, virtually all our new products will require at least a 386. Experience has taught us that whilst there is a substantial user base on lower spec machines, they are not prolific purchasers, end quote.
He's probably right, because...
100% right. Because the people who aren't upgrading their systems probably are not also paying full price for their software.
They're copying the floppy.
Yeah. Don't copy that floppy. So, and this is the key. This is what Origin Systems really pioneered. The idea of, how many people actually have the machine that can run our game? Very few. It doesn't matter because every one of them is going to buy it at full price. And so, this is where... a lot of these guys who are still hoping that their low-end system or their super efficient code is going to give them a very large user base are going to end up with very, very low sales numbers. And
I can imagine that it's strange to think to make a game for so low amount of computers, that especially at that time. And you see it nowadays that there are still, for example, the PlayStation 5. Most of the companies now make a game for the PlayStation 5, but they also make a version which runs on the PlayStation 4 still.
You have to remember, consoles are a little bit different because piracy on consoles is much, much harder.
That's true.
Now, on computers, and this is something that we're going to be seeing this year in the 40-year jump, as the console market crashes and so many companies shift their focus to home computers, what they're going to realize is that the sales numbers for home computer software are going to be only a fraction of what the console software sales were. Because all you need is one kid on the playground to buy the game, and now every kid on the playground has the game.
I was that kid.
Yeah, exactly. We were all that kid. And so the problem is that if you want to sell software, you either have to sell it super, super, super cheap, which means keeping your development costs low. So writing this super efficient, super elegant code, which takes a long time, is no longer cost effective.
No.
Or you target that mature gamer, the one that really can drop $3,000 for a gaming rig, and you make the game for them. And that's what Origin did with Wing Commander, where at the time, if you wanted to play Wing Commander with all the features turned on, you needed at least a $2,500 machine. And we're talking 1990 $2,500. That's at least 2 times that, 3 times that today. So we're talking monster hardware. How many people could afford it? Very, very few. But those were also the people who could afford to drop $60 on the game. And they didn't care about dropping $60 for the game because they had already bought this. And who were they going to get a pirated copy from anyway? Because nobody else could play it.
Yeah.
And Ultima Underworld, same exact story. When I talked to Paul Neurath, who, Looking Glass Studios, a co-founder, we were talking about Ultima Underworld. I asked him, what was the debate about, the specs? What's the minimum spec? Did you worry that you were going to have too low of a user base? And he was just like, we didn't care. The game ran, it looked great, that's it. It didn't matter if it didn't run on the 286s because this was the only way to make the game work. And so this constant drive for the latest tech is going to be the only way to ensure that you have those initial sales of the software. And the UK studios are so stuck. Bitmap Brothers is going to keep trying to support the Amiga. Well, if you're writing a game that will also be portable to the Amiga, it is definitely not taking full advantage of a 386 or a 486.
And then it looks dated. Maybe.
And then it's going to look dated and crap. Microprose is still porting a lot of their games to the Amiga. Gunship 2000 it gets reviewed for the Amiga in a lot of the magazines this month. But it's going to play like absolute ass on an Amiga. Absolutely almost unplayable.
That's also not a great... if people buy it and it doesn't run, then they also...
Well, but that's the thing. If you're still buying it on the Amiga, it's going to just inspire you to move over to a PC.
Yeah, that's true.
Rather than later.
Yeah, there are also people who tried to run Quake on a 486 and it ran, but maybe in two frames a second, and then you think, maybe I have to upgrade.
Exactly. Yeah, you could play Ultima Underworld by turning off all the wall and floor and ceiling textures. You wouldn't want to, but you could. It would make identifying what items you can interact with a lot easier.
There are always people playing like that, but yeah, for each of their own.
There you go. But okay, so yeah, this is. It was an extremely interesting article. They talked about a bunch of other stuff and evolutions in the marketplace and so forth. The article is really good. I recommend everybody check it out. Again, links in the show notes. But this discussion about the 286 being dead, especially since we're talking about so many different chips right now, what just seemed extremely relevant going into the new year.
Cool. Okay, UK's price war comes to a screeching halt.
The massive devaluation of the British pound of 25% to the dollar and even more to the Deutschmark has forced some UK PC sellers to raise their prices. The currency decline is worsened through a European community embargo on Korean memory chips and a lack of 486 chips on the market. CompuAdd expects to be raising its prices by 10%.
Oof, that sounds like a recession or something.
Well, it's not a recession so much. It is a recession for England. This drop in the pound, it's a very famous move by a large investment bank where they basically went out and said the British pound is way overvalued. The economy is way too weak to be supporting this currency at this rate. And yeah, the British pound collapses hard at this point in time. So it collapsed a little bit earlier in the year, but now it's having its effect on the purchase price of the British pound and the British computer manufacturers. So, it's costing them a lot more in pounds to buy the imported components. And we talked just recently, a month or two ago in the 40-year jump, how the UK computer manufacturers had been lobbying 10 years earlier for limitations on the import of computers from overseas because they were trying to make sure that the UK computer market wouldn't just be wiped out by cheap imports from the US and Japan. And at this point in time, basically almost everything in the UK is being manufactured elsewhere. The Sinclairs of this world, the Amstrads of this world, and so forth have all pretty much been wiped out. And things like memory chips and so forth are almost always been imports anyway. So yeah, the purchase power of the pound is key. And so and we just talked about this a month or two ago in the 30-year jump, that the price war was on in the UK, and the prices were getting slashed, and every week it seemed that a PC was getting cheaper and cheaper. Well, that's going to be over for a while. And it's not just the PCs, it's also going to hit Commodore's computers. So the 600 is going to be going up by 10%, and the Amiga 1200 is going to be going up by 8%.
And they already weren't doing that well, probably, at this time.
I mean, they're still selling in good bulk because for a lot of people in the middle and lower middle class, these are the machines that they can afford. You have to remember, at this point in time, while consoles have made some progress in penetration in the market, European markets are still primarily home computer markets, even for gaming. And the Amiga is basically the last man standing. You still have Commodore gaming magazines, Sinclair gaming magazines in the UK, or at least one or two left for each of the systems. But the Atari ST is gone at this point as a relevant factor. The Amiga is the only alternative to a PC, and if the only thing you can afford is a 286 and there's really no good games coming out for that, the Amiga is your place to still play something. And the 1200 has fairly decent graphics. It's the new chipset. So,
I think at this time I played Amiga mostly. I think maybe did the SNES release already in Europe at this time?
At this point, no. The Super Nintendo I think has bin released in Europe at this point already. Wait, let me see. This is a question that the internet can answer quite easily. No,
release date June of 1992. So it's been out for a while.
Yeah, so it came out in the summer of 92 then.
Okay, but that's still pretty new, and a lot of people have an Amiga as a 16-bit gaming machine. So, I think we got our Amiga probably in 94 or something.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Our Super NES in 94.
Yeah, well, and you have to remember also from the standpoint of software, if you want to play a bunch of games, that's going to be a fairly expensive endeavor. Now, video rental stores carrying games is going to be one of the saving graces here. But it's going to take a little bit before the consoles really take off. It's the PlayStation that's really going to make Europe a console heavy market.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's I thought Mega Drive did super well as well.
Mega Drive does super well, but as far as penetration, how many Mega Drives per 100 households or something, it's not nearly what it is in the US or Japan.
Interesting. Yeah. I thought, yeah.
It may have felt like that as a kid, but as far as the total numbers are concerned, the Mega Drive is far more successful than the Super NES in Europe, but even that doesn't nearly have the penetration that the PlayStation is going to achieve. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the Game Boy, on the other hand, does have a very high penetration in Europe.
Oh, yeah. It was everywhere, and still, I think the hardware is still cheaper to get here than in the US, for example. It's people are...
well, today, probably just because, a lot of people just... I don't think that the aftermarket value is the same, or the collector binging isn't the same. But that's another...
Yeah, but when I ask any random friend of mine if they have a Game Boy, they all say, yes, I have one in my drawer. That's crazy. Everyone had one.
Yeah, everybody had one. I mean, it was just ubiquitous in a way that other consoles at the time just weren't. But where you can see how important the market was is the publications, the number of publications that could be supported by these other systems. The fact that the UK at this point has not one but 2 Commodore 64 gaming magazines that are monthly.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean, and they're newsstand magazines. They're not, they're not just somebody typing up a fanzine or something.
No, they actually try to make money out of these magazines.
Well, they were. I mean, they would. The moment a magazine stops making money, they stop publishing it. So they were still making money off of this, and they will for at least one of them will run all the way through towards the end of '94, I believe. So that's how big this market for home computers were, and until that completely dies out, you're not going to get the consoles coming in. Because, that's still going to be the main way people play games is through the computer. The PlayStation changes all that because it's suddenly, just something that's so far above. It has that marketing that's very edgy that fits into the European style a little bit more. And of course, it's so much more open to piracy, which is going to make it much more appealing to the Europeans who are used to pirating a lot of software.
Yeah, I remember that vividly. Anyway, we're digressing.
Okay, but let's move on. We're done with Europe.
IBM eyes Japan.
The Japanese computer market, long closed off to outside computer makers with a myriad of formats, is still largely dominated by NEC and its PC-98 line of semi-PC compatible machines that are roughly 2 to 4 times as expensive as comparable US machines. IBM aims to change all of this by aggressively entering the market with cheaper PC-compatible systems using DOS-V, a kanji-enabled version of DOS. Other US manufacturers like Compaq also are introducing systems, but price is seen as representative of quality, making lower-priced machines harder to sell. The rise of Windows, though, may make the whole thing mute, as the PC-98 bus architecture is not fast enough to run the GUI efficiently.
So at this time, was kanji still a problem, or is it like...
Kanji is always a problem because of resolution.
Yeah, right, but I think the resolution is good enough now to
remember,
run kanji.
No. Super VGA is not a standard yet. 320 by 240, 640 by 480 is pretty much your limit. If you're running Windows 3.1 in the US at this point, you're probably running it at 640 by 480. Which, if you need, you're going to need a lot of pixels for those kanji characters.
Yeah.
You're not getting a lot of them on the screen at once. Now, granted, you don't need as many characters as you would need letters in a Western alphabet, because each kanji, or almost each kanji, represents a word. But still, you need to reformat everything for this to work.
Yeah.
And this has been the big strength, or what has allowed the Japanese-only systems to survive for as long as they have survived.
Right.
But now with Windows being more visually driven, it's going to be easier to put the kanji on the screen. People are going to want to work with, multiple programs open at the same time. But that architecture, that workflow is going to require a much faster bus, and NEC's PC98 bus architecture just can't handle it. So
they have to have something better now.
They're going to have to dump it, and I did a little bit of a deep dive on this. Only very superficially as far as I could. I couldn't spend too much time, but I did go into it for quite a bit. NEC is finally going to break down and create a line of PCs that are going to be basically Windows compatible or normal PC compatibles. And the moment they do that, they lose their market share. And the fact that the machines were 2 to 4 times as expensive as in the States kind of shocked me a little bit.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, PCs are extremely expensive. All these home computers that they have are so unbelievably overpriced. And that kind of explains why consoles are as popular as they are in Japan.
Yeah, there's even a lot of add-ons on the Famicom, for example, to do your taxes or something, stuff like that.
And this is a big contrast with Europe, where you had that race to the bottom with the 8-bits, where Sinclair, Amstrad, Commodore were all fighting to, make cheaper and cheaper home computers. At the same time, once you get to those 16-bit machines, where you have the Atari ST and the Amiga fighting it out in Europe, in Japan, when they move to these semi-PC compatibles, they're just going crazy upwards with the price.
Yeah.
And there's no real outside market pressure to push that down. And, well, IBM wants to break that. And as far as I can tell, Windows is finally what breaks it. When people want to start using Windows and they can't do it on the Japanese machines, they're going to start going to these foreign-designed PC compatibles, and then the jig is up.
Interesting. Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice story. Origin plans diverse future for Ultima brand.
Warren Spector has told German magazine Powerplay, as part of an Ultima Underworld 2 preview, some of the future plans for Origin's flagship RPG series. While the Tales of Ultima series will continue with Arthurian legends, and Ultima 7 Part 2 is still being prepped, a necessary splitting up of the story according to Spector, Ultima 8 will move to a new perspective to prevent blind spots behind walls and the like, which were a problem in Ultima 6 and 7. His most interesting announcement is that Ultima 9 is already being planned out, and they hope that virtual technologies like gloves and stereoscopic headsets will have advanced far enough and gotten cheap enough that the game will be able to take full advantage of them by the time it is released in 2 years.
Sure, that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
but what did they change in Ultima 8? So
Ultima 8 is the Ultima 8 Pagan is the one where they move to an isometric 3/4 point of view
from a first person.
No. So Ultima. No. Okay. So at this point, you have 3 strands of Ultima games.
Okay.
You've got the Ultima Prime games, which use a quasi overhead, so slightly tilted to the side.
Okay.
Overhead perspective. The original games were tile based, and now they moved slightly so there's light angle to everything. That was Ultima 6 and
Diablo,
Ultima 7.
for example.
What?
Like Diablo, for example.
No, Diablo is isometric.
Oh, okay.
Diablo is isometric. No, this is basically you see the character from above, and it's almost like they're leaning to the side, so you see a slightly leaned version.
Okay.
But it's not 100% from the top. And that's the engine that's the perspective they use for Ultima 6 and Ultima 7. Now, the problem with that is if you're behind a wall, the walls are slightly tilted to the side. there's possibility of missing something behind the wall. So they're trying to solve this by going to a true isometric perspective in Ultima, or not true isometric. That's wrong. There's a word for it, but the same angle as Diablo is what they're going to use for Ultima 8.
Okay.
And, in theory, when you go behind a wall, then the wall just becomes transparent, and that way you'll be able to see everything. Ultima 8 is going to be an absolute cluster. It's a huge, huge disappointment. Arthurian Legends, which was going to be part of Tales of Ultima. They had done this already with Ultima 6. They wanted to keep using the game engine because each new Prime Ultima game got a new game engine. So they tried to reuse the Ultima 6 engine, and they made 2 offshoot games. They did Savage Worlds, I believe it was called, and Martian Dreams. So they're basically RPGs using the engine, but had nothing really to do with Ultima. And Arthurian Legends, again, wasn't going to have anything directly to do with the Ultima storyline, but was going to be using the Ultima 7 engine.
Okay.
And that never comes out. Arthurian Legends gets canceled. And then you have the Ultima Underworld series, which was not originally developed as an Ultima game. They just slapped the Ultima trappings on it after the fact.
That's a lot of Ultima.
Developed outside, and then they were just like, "Well, yeah, we'll add a couple names and places and a background story. Now it's an Ultima game." So this is why you've got those 3 strands going. Ultima 8's going to horribly disappoint. Ultima Underworld 2 will be the last in the Underworld series. Ultima 9 is not going to be VR, and it won't come out in 2 years. It's going to come out in 1999.
Wow.
And it's going to be so badly broken when it comes out, it's going to take years of patches before it's really, truly playable. It's a mess.
But especially when you announce so much stuff, it's just confusing. And when you, even after the fact, it's still hard to wrap my head around all these different games.
Well, at the time, it made sense because if you were following computer RPGs, you were aware of all of these different strands of the Ultima brand at that point. And you also have to remember, Origin was just purchased a few months ago by EA.
Okay.
So, EA had a couple of other RPG projects that they've basically canceled. We've talked about them over the last few months as well, including Bard's Tale 4. They've been canceling all their other RPG developments because now they've got Ultima.
Yeah.
And Ultima's got all these spin-offs, and everything's going to be great. And Ultima 8 is going to be a disaster. Ultima 9, years later, is going to be a disaster. Ultima Underworld is not going to go anywhere beyond Ultima Underworld 2, but then they're going to get System Shock as a side benefit. And so on and so forth. And of course, they're going to get the one thing that they didn't think was going to be any good, but turned out to be great for them, which is going to be Ultima Online. That's coming here down the pipeline in a couple of years as well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see that they're thinking about the future technologies. They're thinking about full 3D worlds. They're trying to solve the problem of creating an environment that you can move around in where there's no blind spots like you have with traditional sprite-based gaming. And this idea that VR is going to be the savior is obviously not going to happen, but one of the problems that Ultima 9 is going to suffer from is that they develop it originally as software rendering, and during development, the 3D card of revolution happens. And they just can't adapt fast enough to what the 3D card technology is doing. So it becomes a bit of an issue.
These plans sound more like loud daydreaming than real plans. I don't know. It's
yeah, but at the same time, it's the Ultima series has been known to be pushing boundaries, and Origin is the one that created Wing Commander. They've always been pushing the boundaries. I mean, Ultima Underworld 2 is about to come out. Doom hasn't shown up yet. I mean, these guys are the ones who basically created the modern first-person game. It's, if these guys are telling you, hey, in 2 years you'll have a VR headset, That doesn't seem... I read this article back in the day. I was a Power Play reader. That seemed perfectly reasonable for me. It was like, well, we have it in the arcades already. How much harder can it be, to bring it home? I mean, come on.
If you're naive, yeah, of course.
Well, it's no. Think about all the technologies that we've had in the arcade.
That's true.
Suddenly showed up at home. I mean, yeah. In hindsight, well, obviously it's stupid, but at the time, who would have thought you could have a fully 3D rendered world that you could walk around in first person on a home computer? We didn't even have that in the arcades. 3D graphics in the arcades, we just at this point in time, we're getting Virtua Racing, which is Sega's no shades and no textures, fully of just polygons racing game is in the arcades. But we already have Ultima Underworld with full textured walls and characters running around at home. So the idea that, there's a limit
they're coming
to
together or something,
doesn't seem that, and the Pentium is promising to be up to 4 times more powerful than a 486.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you think that it can do it?
True.
So it's, and this is why hindsight is wonderful to be able to criticize and say, oh, dummies. But at the time, I mean, Warren Spector is one of the most well-regarded people in the computer development community. When he said it, I read this going, oh yeah, man, I want this so bad. But, it didn't turn out that way.
Let's talk about a more fun first-person experience. Wolfenstein publishers at Duel.
Yes. In a curious circumstance, id Software has licensed 2 publishers' rights to Wolfenstein 3D. FormGen got Spear of Destiny, while Apogee is publishing the original shareware game. This month's Computer Gaming World has ads for both, just a few pages from one another.
Wow. And it's also, Spear of Destiny is sort of follow-up, right? Of the shareware game?
So there's the original, I believe it's 4 episodes from the shareware version. So you got the first one for free, and then you could buy the additional 3. And then very quickly they made Spear of Destiny, which was essentially the follow-up, but that was what got sold as a boxed retail game.
Yeah, and that's the thing which made all the money, probably.
Oh, no. The shareware one made all the money.
Really? Oh, I thought they did a quick turnaround to make a sort of follow-up to,
Well, they made a quick turnaround, but you also have to remember, when you sell a product at retail, the retailer gets 50%.
Oh,
then you've got a distributor who has to get it to the retailer. They get a huge chunk. Then you have to manufacture the box and all this other stuff. By the time you pay for all those costs, you're getting pennies on the dollar on the ultimate version. Apogee quite literally was just, throwing discs in baggies and sending them to people.
Yeah.
So,
they're just copying floppies and
they didn't have to pay for rent in a retail store. They just had to buy the ad, which the other guy had to buy an ad too.
Yeah. Weird that they're like dueling in one magazine, but yeah, it's more views for Wolfenstein, I guess. So I think id Software was the real winner here.
Oh, id Software is making off like, well, I mean, they're not making the full amount because they have their contracts with the distributors, but they're making good money. Now, interestingly enough, Spear of Destiny gets reviewed in that issue of Computer Gaming World. And they note in the review that according to an id spokesman, Spear will be the final Wolfenstein installment, and that the team is working on a new title named Doom that is, quote, Wolfenstein times 1,000,000, end quote.
Well, they're sort of right. Yeah, I can't disagree.
Sort of. Come on. Come on. No. They were not underselling it. And, so Spear of Destiny was just another way to make a quick buck. But, yeah, Doom is coming. And Doom is coming soon. and it is going to rock your world.
Okay. Jumpman Lives!
Shareware giant Apogee has released Jumpman Lives, a sequel to the 8-bit classic Jumpman and Jumpman Jr. from Epix. The first of 4 episodes featuring a dozen levels are shareware.
What is this? I thought Jumpman is Mario, but...
No. Okay, there's an actual game called Jumpman.
Okay.
It's an early game by Epix, in 1982 or 83, I can't remember. And it's originally from the on the Atari 8-bits. It gets really, really popular on the Commodore 64. Gets a bunch of other ports. And it's a single-screen jump and run where you have to get these bombs that are basically look like little donuts. But they're bombs that you pick up, and each level has a different gimmick. So sometimes you can jump, sometimes the jump does something weird. There's different types of enemies in each level. So it's sort of a puzzle action game where you have to figure out what order to do things in to be able to get the bombs off the screen.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant game. Mads recently finally finished Jumpman Jr., which was the abbreviated sequel that they released only on cartridge. And that's much harder game. So he finally finished that. I finished the original Jumpman. I've never played didn't finish Jumpman Jr. I've played it, but I didn't finish it. But yeah, absolutely amazing game. I remember reading about this and being super excited and even playing the shareware a few years later. But Apogee unfortunately doesn't quite have the rights. They thought they had the rights to the game. They didn't have the rights. And so Epix gets them to pull this from the market. So unfortunately, Jumpman lives, but only for a very, very short time.
Aww. And Epix is the company behind Lynx, right?
Epix is the company that designed the Lynx, yes.
So there's maybe a Jumpman on Lynx as well?
No, unfortunately not. No. Because remember, they sold the Lynx to Atari.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
They hit financial troubles because it was just too big of a project, and they couldn't really handle it. They were really just a software company that stayed on the Commodore 64 too long. They didn't move into PC development fast enough. They were famous for summer games and winter games and all those multi-event sports titles back in the day.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about Epix and its transition to greatness, please check out my interview with Michael Katz. And we'll be talking about him in the next episode, our 40-year jump to February of 1982. But that's another issue entirely. Yes.
Let's get over to the legal side of things. Yes. ESPN and EA settle.
We reported last month that ESPN, the American sports cable channel, had filed suit against Electronic Arts complaining that their EA Sports Network logo was too close to their own. EA promptly countersued to prevent ESPN from using their logo in any interactive entertainment arena. The two sides have now settled, and EASN will henceforth be known as EA Sports and will even advertise on ESPN.
But that EA Sports still looks like the ESPN logo.
Well, it kind of looks like it because it still has the ES, but it's not the EA Sports Network.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not EASN, it's like ESPN, it's still different enough. And of course, EA Sports has long now been a major advertiser during ESPN sports events because, a lot of crossover between those two groups.
So eventually they became friends.
Yeah, they've become friends now. They've settled the hatchet, but EASN, the short history of EASN is over, and the very long, still ongoing history of EA Sports is alive and kicking.
It's in the game.
It's in the game, yeah.
Okay, Double Dragon coming to cinemas.
The release date isn't set, but EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, has confirmed that Bimmy and Jimmy are coming to the big screen.
Is it?
No, it's not Bimmy and Jimmy. That's just a mistake from
but
the intro sequence on the NES port of Double Dragon 3.
But Double Dragon the movie doesn't ring a bell for me.
Oh, you lucky bastard. That's going to tell you all about it.
You let me watch the Mario Bros. Movie as well.
Yeah. We've done the Mario Brothers movie. No, Double Dragon is so much worse than the Mario Brothers movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's really no way of explaining just how terrible this film is. And I haven't even seen it all the way through yet, and I know it's that bad.
So you can't even watch it all the way through.
That's probably going to have to be the next one that we do. Yeah, Double Dragon is they've had a comic book already, and now they've got the movie rights, and it's not good. So that's all I have to say about that at this point.
Can't wait for the movie watching.
Yeah. But now let's move away from games for a little bit. Let's get some of that extra pop culture goodness in here.
Deep Space Nine launches.
The best Star Trek sequel series ever launches on January 3rd. Yes, the first season and a half is pretty hit or miss, but after that, it rocks.
This is actually Star Trek. I never watched this.
What?
Not Deep Space Nine. I used to watch Star Trek with my father when I was a kid, but
yeah,
and I even watched that movie. There was a movie with the Borgs. I don't know.
Oh, First Contact.
Yeah, that one. I've seen that in the cinema with him, and yeah, for me it's like Star Trek I associate with my father. And so I never went back into watching Star Trek anymore.
Yeah, no. I'm a huge Trekkie. A little bit of a lapsed Trekkie. New Trek, it wasn't really my cup of tea, but Deep Space Nine is so glorious. It's
I heard.
It moves it over to a space station, so you have a more fixed storyline with more fixed characters. And yeah, the first season and a half is weird because they had the mandate to still make it so that when they sold it into syndication, every episode had to stand on its own. You weren't allowed to tell a serialized story.
Oh.
But then the producer on the show gets more freedom, and they start telling a continuous story. And from there through to the end of the 7th season, it's one continuous story. And so you get a whole big war, you get multiple seasons of war, and you get to see, how do Starfleet ideals hold up under really bad circumstances, and the characters and the politics. It's so good. It's so good.
Sounds like something I would like. I also watched The Expanse, for example. Not long ago. It sounds
The
similar.
Expanse is also an amazing show. And it feels very much like that. Obviously, The Expanse tries to be a little bit more science-y, and Star Trek always has a little bit of that 1960s,
fantasy,
psychic power thing going on from psychedelia. But Deep Space Nine, I can only recommend it. Granted, you have to get through that first season, and it's tough. There's some absolutely terrible episodes in there.
So skip to the second.
Well, if you skip through the second, there's certain setups that you'll miss.
Oh.
That's the only problem. You kind of have to watch it, even though it's really, really painful. But after that, it's smooth sailing all the way through season 7. All the way to the end, it's great. Now,
I always like the more hard science things more, like the fantasy stuff. It's always a bit distracting or something, that it gets me out of the immersion of the story. For example, the newer Battlestar Galactica series I really loved. It's also been a while since I've seen that, so
you mean
I don't
with
know
the
if it still holds
angels?
up.
The one with angels in it.
Angels? Maybe?
Angels. Well,
we have to look that up.
The new Battlestar Galactica. What do you think the lady in red was? How do you explain her? She's not hard science. She's basically, the final twist is they're angels.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's really strange.
Yeah.
The final season was really, really strange. You're right.
The final season was them finally figuring out that the mystery box that they had set up, they didn't have an answer for. But okay, we don't need to talk about that. I've got my issues. I enjoyed the show, but yeah, I always tell everybody, if you're going to watch it, don't watch the final episodes.
Yeah.
Stop at the second to last episode and just don't watch the final episode. It's much better that way.
Yeah, true.
But okay. Now, very important here as a side note, Babylon 5 gets a write-up in this month's Electronic Gaming's Monthly as well, and it will debut in February. So we've got Deep Space Nine debuting in January, about a space station, science fiction. Babylon 5, also about a space station, debuts just a month later. And not nearly the budget of Deep Space Nine, and it shows in the special effects and so forth. Some might argue a much better story, Babylon 5. I would not disagree. Yeah, it's got a couple of rough edges as well, but Babylon 5 is also one that I can only recommend everybody check out.
That's also that also get mixed up, these two series, in my head. I think yeah, they released the same time, so
exactly.
Yeah,
it's
really confusing.
It's one of those parallel evolutions as people are thinking of the same idea. Babylon 5 has a much more complex plot. It starts out already in serialized mode, telling one long story. Some recasting gets a little weird, but other than that, it's a very, very good show.
Well, I was 10 years old when this released, so
you've got
any sense out of it.
in the world to catch up now.
But that's probably why I didn't see it, because it's too complex for my little child mind.
Of course. Okay, but
more science
keep
fiction.
Going. We're not done with sci-fi yet.
Douglas Adams closes out Hitchhiker's trilogy.
Mostly Harmless, the 5th book in the series, has just been released in England, according to German gaming mag ASM.
The 5th book in the trilogy. That's always funny.
Yeah, that was
it's always funny.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously this probably came out a couple months earlier because of the publication dates and everything. But yeah, so this is the end of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. And this wouldn't be a geek-oriented podcast if I didn't make mention of it. So I've made mention of it. It's great. If you haven't read it, go and read it. What's wrong with you? And have you read it?
I think the first 2 books.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm taking away your card. Your member's card is gone.
I'm not really a reader, so I watched the movie, but that's not great.
Okay. Let's close this out with a death.
Yeah, Peter would like this. Sears Business Centers close.
A major player in making professional machines available, especially early IBM PCs, the Sears Business Centers have closed down. We covered their opening in a 40-year jump last year. The stiff competition from mail order operators and specialty stores has made the operation simply too specialized for America's largest retailer.
Yeah, what's Sears Business Center?
Okay.
Sears is like a convenience or like a big store, like a...
Well, Sears originally started out as a catalog business in the 19th century.
I know those magazines. I watch some YouTubers who buy those magazines from thrift stores to just glance on the ads.
Well, the catalogs, yeah. Yeah, so the Sears catalog spawns Sears retail stores, so they're giant department stores, very famous for their tools. The Black & Decker line of tools was theirs, which still exists today. That got spun off. But you could buy everything from clothing to a home computer to whatever in a Sears store. And what they opened up back in 1982 were the Sears Business Centers. So because Sears was the biggest retail company in the United States, they had stores everywhere. And they started opening up these side operations, usually at the same location, but as in a separate building, where you could go in and buy a business computer. So a lot of small companies, mom and pop shop companies, suddenly had a local company available to them where they could buy maybe a computer to do their accounting, to run VisiCalc or whatever. And the fact that the Sears business centers were there were extremely important in making these machines available to a lot of the very spread out towns and communities in the United States. Because you have to remember, the United States is such a spread out environment. It's not like in Europe where everybody lives in relatively close proximity to one another. So having Sears get into this business really helped propel a lot of these machines. And well, now with Gateway and Dell and all these other guys selling computers through mail order, and very soon over the internet in a couple of years, and then all these other smaller specialty shops that can put machines together from individual components, because now we have the IBM compatibles. The Sears business centers simply didn't serve their purpose anymore, and Sears has decided to shut them down. But it is the end of an era.
Yeah. Always sad when a store closes.
Yeah. Well, especially one that had such an impact. But, okay. That's the end of the show. Wouter, you have one more task. What is the word of the episode?
Well, because of the VR, a lot of VR talk and a lot of science fiction talk, my word of the day is science fiction, which is 2 words.
We'll call it sci-fi. That counts.
Sci-fi, yeah, but yeah.
There you go. Okay, sci-fi is the word of the day. Wouter, where can everybody find your good work?
You can follow me on Twitter, on twitter.com/Wido. You can also go to newgameoldflame.com. I'm now an official co-host there, and I recorded 2 shows now, so go listen to that. It's about old or new games on old video game systems. So if you like that, go follow that as well.
Excellent. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. Everybody, as always, follow us on Patreon, blah, 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 blah. And see you next time. Have fun.
Bye.